Hello, I'd like to say thank you to Dr. Joel, to my dear friends Wendy Van de la Castro, Nia Nelson, and all the amazing folks at the Foundation for Lincoln Public Schools. But most importantly, I would like to say congratulations to all of the Inspire winners. Out of all of those in the LPS universe, you were chosen because you are an inspiration. This means that you have an amazing gift. And it would be a travesty if you didn't use that gift. The world needs you now more than ever. The world needs you to be a leader. Notice I didn't say follower. Be careful when you follow the masses. Sometimes that M is silent. So here's what I know about you as a recipient of this award. You have both the hard wiring and the heart wiring to make a sizable dent in the world. The gift you've been given is more scarce than we'd all like to believe, and with that gift comes great responsibility. Please use it wisely and use it abundantly. And speaking of a gift, I'd like to share today a story with you of one of the greatest gifts that I was ever given. In 2001, I was planning an epic adventure to New Zealand with an old college buddy of mine, and it was a pretty self-indulgent trip. I was feeling incredibly guilty because I was going to be gone for a couple of weeks. And at that point, I had never been away from my kids for more than just a couple of days. And one of them, my middle daughter, had what could best be described as serious separation anxiety. If we were leaving, she would lunge forward and literally wrap her entire body around my leg. I'd have to peel her off and hand her to the babysitter as she was kicking and screaming, "Don't leave me, don't leave me." And I would cautiously back out of the house, assuring her that, "Sweetheart, the movie's only 2 hours long. I promise we'll come home." So there was that. But the guilt that I was feeling about this epic adventure was more than just leaving my kids behind. It was because we were planning to go scuba diving with sharks and zip lining and jump out of airplanes and ride motorcycles on mountain ridges, all the crazy things I'd always wanted to do. And there was more than a 0% chance that I was going to die and never come home. So I'm thinking, as a way to assuage my guilt, I need to do something for my girls, something they could remember me by, for the time I'd be gone, and also just in case I never came back. My daughters were 6 and 9 at the time. And every night before bedtime was story time. There were a lot of books, but on many nights, we would add another chapter in the ongoing saga of Jennifer, a character, a heroine that we had made up and created a fictional world around. Jennifer was a brave, courageous little girl who found herself stranded and made the best of it on a chain of islands. The center island was formed by a giant volcano that oozed hot chocolate lava and formed chocolate rivers that had marshmallows floating in them like logs. The flowers were candy canes, the trees were giant candy bars, and the beaches were made of Skittles. And of course, there were frequent visitors, grandma, cousins, even Lizzie McGuire spent some time vacationing in Jennifer's magical little world. But most of the visitors were total strangers. Other children about the same age as my daughters. And the most amazing thing is how Jennifer would tend to the people who showed up. If someone was feeling lost, Jennifer would help them find their way. If they were lonely, she would become their friend and make sure they felt loved. And if they were feeling afraid, she had this uncanny ability to help them overcome their fears. So my big idea was to set up a recording studio in my closet. As a former broadcasting major in college, I'd been taught that the best way to get a great recording and absorb all the ambient sound was to do it in a closet full of clothing. And I sat in that closet, set up a little chair, and I spent the entire weekend recording myself reading their favorite books into a tape recorder, complete with a little toy glockenspiel that I would push a button and it would make the sound so they knew when it was time to turn the page. I made 8 different cassettes, 2 per side, so 16 stories total. And I remember that feeling that I had when I had the cassettes laid out on the table and I stood back admiring my work, feeling so proud of myself. And I remember thinking very clearly that this would be a gift that my daughters would remember forever. Fast forward a few days later, we're at the airport. I'm getting ready to board the plane. And the girls handed me a little doll, handmade out of yarn. I didn't know what it was at first. I just saw kind of a wad of yarn that was strung together. And I remember saying something along the lines of, "Oh, this is so sweet, thank you." But I said it with that same saccharine tone that I had used hundreds of other times when they gave me a piece of their art or something that they had made. Y'all know what I'm talking about. I've seen some of your refrigerators. But then one of my girls said something that made me realize how much they'd been thinking about this. She said, "Daddy, you're going on a big adventure. So we decided you needed to take Jennifer with you." So this little wad of yarn was Jennifer. And she went on, "She'll help you if you get lost. And if she's with you, you're never going to feel lonely and you won't be afraid to do anything." I was fully expecting her to lunge forward and grab my leg, but she didn't. She had that kind of stiff lip, and her bottom lip was trembling a little bit as she looked at me and she said, "If you have Jennifer with you, everything's going to be okay." So my daughters, operating from a place of love instead of a place of guilt, gave me a gift that I actually will remember forever. Now, just to be really clear, having two daughters is not all rainbows and fairies. And I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. Pre-teen girls are so precocious, so beautiful, so amazing. But there are times you just don't know what to do with them. But no matter how frustrated I've ever been with my daughters or with what life in general has thrown at me, and life throws hard stuff at us. We all know that. We have bad days, bad weeks. Heck, Superintendent Joel has probably been around long enough that he's had a bad decade. We lose pets or fail a test or get fired from our first job. In 2002, I was fired as the CEO of my own company, one of the most embarrassing chapters in my life. By all accounts, we should have gone out of business. I should have given up, but I had Jennifer. In 2011, my entire family had gathered around my mother during the last few weeks of her fight with breast cancer. She was truly a remarkable woman, and like most mothers, she sacrificed so that those around her had everything that they needed to live a joyous life. But now for 2 weeks, she'd been lying on this adjustable hospital bed in the middle of my parents' living room, fighting for every breath. And I remember crawling into that bed with her, and I cradled her head with my left hand. And while stroking her cheek with my right hand, I found the strength to gaze into her eyes and smile. And I whispered to her, "Mom, we love you so much. You're the best mom that anyone could ever ask for, but please, you need to know that it's okay to let go. It's okay. We're going to be okay." And she took her last breath looking into the eyes of someone who loves her more than life itself. Jennifer was in my pocket that day. No matter what, I have Jennifer, and all she represents to keep me from getting lost, from feeling lonely or being afraid to try or do anything. And I'm going to share Jennifer with you here now. This is Jennifer. Jennifer has now traveled with me all over the world, nearly 100 countries, and been there for all of life's really important events. I put her in my pocket when I know I'm about to do something where I need to feel her strength. It's a reminder of everything that matters to me in this life. It's a simple gesture, innocently shared with me, purely as an act of love, as opposed to self-preservation or guilt. And I learned from my 6 and 9-year-old daughters that the sweetest nectar of life comes when we allow ourselves to feel with our hearts instead of our heads. And when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, especially for feeling lost or lonely or afraid. With this kind of philosophy, we can overcome anything. We can be bold, we can take risks, we can fall and get back up because everything's going to be okay. So today I'd like to humbly invite you to join me as I continue to explore and open my heart and truly embody what it means to be vulnerable, which in my humble opinion is the single most important characteristic of a good leader. Being vulnerable in the context of leadership, at least, it doesn't diminish our credibility, it enhances it. And leading from a place of love doesn't compromise our power, it elevates it. I'd like to finish today by challenging each and every one of you to commit to one thing, just one thing that you've learned from a teacher, an administrator, a friend, anyone, especially during this last year when we've all been struggling, dealing with COVID and how it's turned our lives upside down. Find that lesson, find that thing that you can commit to and put it into practice in your life. What's your one thing going to be? And how will you use that to hone in on becoming the best possible version of yourself, no matter where you are on that journey? I shared with my daughter Ellen, same one who grabbed my leg and wouldn't let go, that I was going to be speaking to you all as part of this event. And I asked her what advice or inspiration she might suggest. Ellen is a proud graduate of Lincoln Public Schools. She went on to run a research lab at Stanford University that works with children who are on the autistic spectrum. And now she's pursuing and finishing her doctorate in neuropsychology. And she's dedicating her life to work with autistic children. And her advice is this. She said, "Dad, just remind them that it's never too late, or in some cases, it's never too early to be who you might have been." Congratulations on your award, and thank you for giving me the gift of your time.